Definitely had more people signed up. So I imagine people will be coming in dribs and drabs. There's always things going on after school, various clubs, various commitments, parents to speak to, things to do. So we'll filter people in as well they come along. But last 15 seconds or so, how many differences can you spot in this picture? If you've not submitted an answer just yet, pop it in the chat. Seems 13 is the most common at the minute, although 12s have been mentioned a fair old amount. Let's see if you've got the right answer or if indeed there are any that you've missed. Okay, last couple in the chat. Let's see. Smashing. Thank you, Eve. Lauren's in with 12 as well. We've got 13. Okay, so they seem to be the common ones. Let's reveal all. Let's see how many there actually are. So I said, how many differences can you spot? Did you spot all 15 of them? So that first one, Alicia, when she said it was 16, you were actually very close. There are indeed 15. Let's see if we are indeed keen to see where those 15 are and see which ones that you missed. So here we go, revealed on the screen in yellow. Have a little look through. See which ones that you missed, which ones you didn't see. It took me an age to find this 15, by the way. So you had much less time than I had. I think when I first did it, I found 10 and I was stuck on 10 for ages. And I still might have missed some. So if you spot one that I've missed, do tell me. I'll be fuming. So that's our 15 there. See which ones you spotted. See if you're kicking yourself. And again, I can't stress enough, if I have missed one, type or unmute and tell me, because I'll be really annoyed if I have, I think. Or if you're not sure what one of the things I've circled is, and you think I've made a mistake and it isn't a difference, please do challenge me. I welcome it. So there's our 15 differences. Quite an interesting one, quite a good one, that one. I enjoyed putting that one together. Hope you sort of woke us up while we've got our brews and our biscuits for our Peedley network meeting. And as I already mentioned, it's our first one of 2022. So it's a pleasure to be back. And my first one was in December for me hosting. And this is nice for me. Usually it's just a voice behind a camera. Now it's good to be on the video to share what is ultimately some updates across North Yorkshire, through North Yorkshire Sport, sharing some good practice of what's going on. And I've got the pleasure to have Eve Murphy and soon to be Will Swaithes as well coming to join us this evening to speak about particular areas. Hopefully there'll be opportunity for some Q&A around those areas. A bit later, time permitting, it would be great if anybody who's on this call would be brave enough and willing to share any successes or any challenges from your setting of what's worked in the past 3 to 6 months, anything which hasn't worked and what seems to be a pain point. And then before you all go and run away and put your slippers on at home and your dressing gowns and settle in for the night, I will be asking you to do a quick feedback survey. And I know these can seem like a bit of a pain in the backside sometimes, but it is invaluable information for me, particularly in this role now at North Yorkshire Sport, because it allows me to tailor and cater any future provision for you in your school or a cluster of schools, all these P-League network meetings, so I can make sure that the content is adequate and it's something we want to be part of and something that we can all be learning from as well. So without further ado, a brief agenda as I just take a quick sip of water. I'll be kicking off in a moment with some key updates just from North Yorkshire Sport. Nothing new reinventing the wheel there, but just to reiterate a few points. I'll then spend a few minutes talking about a concept that I'll be involved in, hopefully launching across the county next year, which was initiated by predecessors to myself in this role. So Faye Pashby, Gavin Phillis, who are no longer with us, which is PESPA Learning Triads, but I'll explain more about that shortly. Then we'll have Will with us to talk about assessment in primary PE, followed by Eve talking about outstanding dance in primary setting. Then we'll have, time permitting, an open forum to share those challenges and any successes in your setting. And then finally, I'll wrap up with a few bits and pieces in terms of upcoming CPD opportunities that you may have missed or that you may indeed want to get yourselves involved in. If at any point you've got a question, feel free to pop it in the chat and I'll do my best to keep tabs with that. But as I've already mentioned, I'm a colleague down today. I've usually got 2 North Yorkshire sport colleagues on here, just me by myself. So I'll do my best to keep tabs on all of that on the Zoom chat as I'm sharing this screen as well. So let's kick off then. Updates from North Yorkshire Sport. I always start with this one because we always get asked about it. And it's just for those who maybe missed the last meeting, who haven't been keeping tabs with what's going on. And it's related to the good old PE and school sports premium and just those basics really of when it needs to be spent by, what it needs to be spent on, focusing on those key indicators. And one in particular, which I want to pick up on here, and I might ask some of you to chip in if you wouldn't mind, is about the fact that we can use it for swimming top up. And I know swimming's been impacted hard over the past couple of years, particularly with the COVID pandemic and access to pools and whether we can and can't go. And that's had a knock-on effect down school. And I had a question emailed to me from Charlotte Hannah, who I think is either on the call or she's going to be at some point. And she wanted me to put this out there to everybody just to see what other schools themselves have put in place, particularly for year 6 children who can't swim 25 meters. So what things you've done for those year 6s, who you know, and not quite at that required standard. And she wanted to ask that to see what other schools had done. Now, before I maybe ask some of you to pop in the chat or unmute, a school that I was working alongside last year who weren't in North Yorkshire, they were up in Teesside. They waited till the very end of the academic year and took 2 weeks, and they took their entire year 6 cohort for 2 weeks solid every afternoon. Really is a huge focus to top up, but to also ensure that they had that rigorous and focused work day after day. And I believe they use some of their funding for that. But this is where I almost pass over to you immediately, the good PE leads of North Yorkshire. And if there is anybody on the call who'd be willing to just share what they've done or what they do for those year 6 children, maybe in past years or this year, who can't swim 25 meters, the floor is yours. Please do unmute and share with us.
Hi, Megan.
Oh, hi. Thank you for jumping on.
We obviously used to do swimming for just our year 6s, but we were finding that just waiting till year 6 wasn't good enough. Then it was too late. So what we've put in place over the last couple of years is we've made sure that all of our Key Stage 2 children are swimming across the year, right from year 3 right through to year 6. So hopefully by them going every year with us for at least half a term, by the time they get to year 6, they will be competent swimmers. And then our year 6s go twice in a year as well. So they do at the start of the year, and those children that are still not competent, they almost have like a booster group and go again in the summer term.
Smashing. It sounds to me there like you've really nailed down how you want swimming to look in your school. And I can't speak for your context, your environment, where you take them and how that's figured out. But we know that swimming is a statutory part of the national curriculum. So you're factoring that in right through Key Stage 2. And then assuming at the end of year 6, if needs be, you can spend some of the premium on that top up. Again, if you don't mind me asking, is that what you're doing? Do you go to a local leisure centre? Do you walk? Do you get a bus? How does that look?
So we go to the local leisure centre, but unfortunately it's not really in walking distance for us to be able to get there. So we have to go on a bus to the local leisure centre, which obviously comes out of the sport premium money again, but it is a value experience for the children because some of them may have not been swimming with their family. So it's just something that we put into place.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. And actually, when you see some of the nonsense that the sports premium spent on, when you're speaking about swimming and being a life skill, whatever that takes to get there, 100% we need to be getting our kids swimming. So agree with that. I can see some things coming up in the chat. It'd be great. You can all read that yourselves as you go through. I know Sophie's just put few bits and pieces in, Sarah as well. Take any pupils who aren't standards along with the year 4 core curriculum. Yeah, so you sort of so can I just ask there, Sarah, with yours, do you take them along with the year 4s at the same time?
Yes, Ryan, we do. We take them alongside them. So we have to pick a bus. So we make sure the bus has got enough space. But I'm just putting that the numbers are increasing. So it's becoming an increasing problem. So we need to think about next year.
Yeah,
Ryan, as well, just to add from our perspective at Lindhead, we historically have done years 3 and 4. But with the last 2 years being so interrupted, we wanted to focus on upper key stage 2. So we've gone for year 5 and year 4. But what we did is we did a survey of all the year 6s to say who can't confidently swim 25 metres. So they actually go with the year 5s. So in some cases, we'll have some children who get catch up in year 4, year 5 and year 6. Now, obviously this year, because it's 4 and 5, we're not targeting year 3 yet, because at least we think we've got 3 years to work with them. What the pandemic has done, though, is given us less time to work with children. So we're now just trying to prioritise them. I think we've got 2 who can't do the 25 metres. And we'll probably try and put something else in. We go to everyone active in Scarborough. We get a bus, and we've really tried to change the focus really to being upper key stage 2, because we know we've got less time to work with them.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Thanks for that, Jason. Really appreciate your input there. That's fantastic. Again, anyone else, if you want to unmute and add to that, just sort of if picking up for anyone who's joining us again here, just a question that Charlotte sent in to me about what other schools put in place for year 6 children who can't swim 25 metres and what that looks like in your setting and when they access that. Is there anybody else who wants to jump in? We've got some fantastic comments in the chat, so thank you very much for those engaging in there who are typing. I'm just trying to keep tabs with who's put what in here. But that's really incredibly helpful to anybody who's maybe got that same issue and wondering what it is that they could or what they should do. I've got Sophie here asking, Becky, which school are you? What school are you, Becky?
Hi, I'm from working at Glusburn Primary School.
Okay, smashing. Thank you. There we go. That answers your question for you there, Sophie, hopefully. Yeah, and lots of comments coming in. And if you need to keep those little chats in and amongst going through this, absolutely do so. I'm just conscious of all of the things that we've got to get through, but that's incredibly helpful. And this is why we jump on the meetings like this, because it can be that little soundbite, little nugget of information, what another school might be doing and considering, which can prompt you and make you think, you know what, that's something we could consider. Let's go away and have a look at that ourselves as well. So that's smashing. And just more onto that, in terms of the premium, this was mentioned in the December meeting that we had, but about what we need to publish. And ultimately, it's that accountability this year, which we've not seen as such before. And again, it's kind of a game of roulette. I suspect from when I've done trainings this year, working alongside some skits and universities and hearing the stories from the trainees that I've worked with about what schools are spending their premium or not spending their premium on. Some schools will play that game of roulette and think, well, we'll keep pulling the wool over the eyes of those powers that be. What's the chances we're going to get selected? But as we know, schools will be selected this year for a sampling review, and they'll really dig into and scrutinise that you're complying with what the spending should be spent on. Can we justify that? And is the spending that we've put out there sustainable? And is it going to be fulfilling for us for years to come? In terms of updates of premium moving forward, there's no firm update or confirmation any which way yet what that will look like next year. I can only speak from gut feeling is that it will continue in some capacity, but I also get the gut feeling that, and whatever that looks like, certainly in the next few years, it's coming to sort of an end of what it looks like in its current format, in my opinion. And it may well change a little bit, but again, that is my opinion, so don't take that as absolute gospel. And of course, if you are evidencing it, in your own way, that's absolutely fine. I've still always find that the most easy, logical way for me to work through this is just simply using the AFPI template on their website. You can get it from that link there, really easily set out. That's the revised template from July last year. Breaks down the key indicators beautifully. You're able to explain exactly what you've spent your money on, where it's going, what impact it's had. And it's a great way to document that and then make sure it is on your website. So before I move on, any thoughts, any questions at this point? I mean, we're still very early on. It was a quick whistle-stop tour there. I can still see a few more bits and pieces in the chat, which is smashing. Good stuff. Okay, I'm going to dive forward to this now. I just want to very briefly touch upon this because a couple of weeks ago, it was publication by Ofsted as part of their subject reviews, and they did a PE review series. And some of you may well have seen this. There was a lot of buzz online on Twitter around this, and there's a 30-page document being published by Ofsted, essentially outlining what they think PE should be, what PE is, and what good PE should look like. And there's a lot to digest. You'd need a good hour to sit down and go through the full document and make of it what you will in terms of what they're looking for. But the Twitter handle of Mark Hayes, somebody I've never met, very kindly on the back of that summarized it basically in visual form. And I'm going to pop it on the screen now for you to have a little look through. And it was a three-pager. And it was a summary of all of the key points that were taken from the subject review that happened there. Go back on that. So we've got various bits and pieces that were touched upon, from competence, motor competencies, summarized beautifully here. I'm just going to leave it up for 20, 30 seconds for you to maybe pick on one if you can see it, have a quick scan. But I'm going to highlight 3 points that really resonated with me. And if you do get a chance just to have a look at the full document, it would be certainly worth having a look at. And while you're having a little look, I'm trying to figure out why on my screen I've got this big yellow cross here on the side. I don't know where that's come from. If you simply, Charlotte, I can see in the chat there, if you just Googled essentially PE subject review Ofsted, you will find it at the top of the Google search. This was off of Twitter, this breakdown. It was an image I got from somebody who posted on Twitter. Mr. Mark Hayes, if you're on Twitter, his Twitter handle's in the top left there, at Mr. Mark Hayes. I'm sure it'll be pinned to his Twitter account. If not, it'll be one of the most recent tweets he did. And I just downloaded and screenshotted them off my phone. But I'll just highlight a couple of ones that stood out to me. So first one which stood out to me, which you saw the circle for, is competence. And this sort of underpins a lot of the noise, if you like, that's coming out of Ofsted recently. Hannah Miller spoke about in her Ofsted speak around PE back in October, November, about competence being key. And actually, it's one of the first of the 4 aims of the national curriculum is competence. And that runs through the other aims as well. I mean, if we are competent, we're going to be more inclined to be able to take part in competitive sports, and we need to have competence to do that. Competence, it's those foundational, fundamental movement skills, those building blocks, essentially, for learning. And the way she summarizes this and talks about it is thinking about learning as a Jenga tower. And we've got various blocks stacking one on top of the other, and each layer of learning relies on the one beneath it. And if any of those layers beneath it, foundational skills, the way that we move, stability, object manipulation isn't there, you risk the security of future learning. So it's about that input of making sure that our pupils are competent in the foundations before moving on. I think we do sometimes have a tendency to move on in PE very quick and stick to rigid blocks because our scheme tells us to. And that's why we've got to think here about our pupils as being novices. We're not trying to develop the next professional athletes in any particular sport. They are novices. So we need to make sure that we're treating them as such and making sure that they're able to do the fundamentals and giving them opportunity. A key word here that they use an awful lot, as you'll see in a minute, is to practice what it is that they're doing. And then finally, another one I wanted to highlight, because I know it's common, certainly since the premiums come into play, but it's the outsourcing in PE. And essentially what we're talking about here is we're wanting schools to make sure that are they quality assuring what's happening? Do they know what's going on with their physical education offering? Who's delivering it? For how long? And I put out a rather controversial tweet to some last night saying, if a school has had CPD year upon year for 5 years in a row, and it's the same people, have they really had any CPD? And the only reason I put that out there, and it was interesting to see the responses, is my view of, I realize it's continuing professional development, but it should be to a stage where you can let them fly alone. Your teacher's able to then go and do things themselves, and maybe actually be able to do that in-house and share what you've learned from that provider through your own meetings. But if you've got that same person, that same company time and time again, to what extent is that development happening? And is it more of a hand-holding exercise? And think about when we learn to drive and something like that, eventually we get the wheel ourselves and we go. So what point is that happening? And then finally, this quote, which I like here with regards to curriculum, and it's something I believe passionately in, and this is a quote from the report itself as well, about curriculums with shorter blocks of learning across multiple activities can be described as being a mile wide and an inch thick. This approach can mean that the curriculum lacks the depth of learning required for pupils to achieve any level of success in a particular activity before moving on to the next. This is particularly concerning when considering the role that competence can play. And the reason I mention that is simply around the fact that we often do compartmentalize our learning into 6-week blocks, 6 weeks of football, or we'll do 6 weeks of hockey, or 6 weeks of gymnastics. But where's the fluidity in that? And we can't presume that learning works in such a linear fashion. It might go up, down, left, right, backwards, forwards, but not always in that straight line as well. And just on that, with the report, this was taken from Greg Dreyer. I love Greg. He's a real influence in the space to myself and someone I respect hugely. And he did a piece on this report afterwards where he unpicked how many times a particular word or phrase was mentioned in it. And I don't know whether I should be worried or excited about this. But you can see here in this first column, the amount of times particular words were mentioned. The one which stands out to me most there is the word sport, which is mentioned 173 times in this report. I don't know whether it's good or bad, to be honest with you. Maybe that's slightly worrying. But what worried me a little bit more is the words that weren't mentioned as much, but something we should still hopefully be striving towards as we're leading our subjects in our school. If you look at some of the words here that had limited or no mention, personal relevance, that meaning for the pupils who are in our school, for our context towards their learning. Fun. I don't know about you guys, but we want our learning to be fun. We want our teaching of physical education to be fun, coming back for more. It wasn't mentioned once. And finally, at the bottom, which was mentioned once, inclusion. But we want our environments to be inclusive to all of our pupils. So it's just being mindful, even when we do read these reviews, because let's take them with a pinch of salt. It might give us a little bit of an idea or guidance, but this is roughly up for interpretation. I just do want you to consider that. And that's a great piece that Greg shared. So if you want to, again, follow Greg on Twitter, I've put his handle up there for you, at Greg_Dreyer at the top. And I can see Will has indeed joined us. Can you just confirm you are with us, Will?
Yeah. Hi, Ryan. Hi, folks.
Hi, Will. And what I'm going to do is make you a co-host, Will, and in about 3 or 4 minutes, I'll pass on the baton to you, if that's all right.
Yeah, no problem. But
Perfect.
No rush. I've got plenty of time. I'm not rushing to get off, Ryan, so we're good.
Smashing. Thank you, Will. I appreciate that. Just very briefly from my perspective, then, last thing before I pass over to Will and I can mute my microphone for a little while, it's just a little concept starting next year in North Yorkshire. And I'm looking for all you PE leads in North Yorkshire if you want to get involved in this. And it's Learning Triad Review, which was first thought about from, again, my predecessor, Faye Pashby and Gavin Phillips. The baton got passed to me and I've been able to play around with it. And essentially this Learning Triads Review is something that I'm looking to get up and running starting in September. So we've got a few months to play around with this. And on the back of today's call, if you are interested in undertaking this journey with us, I will ask you to, on the feedback form, sign up, put your email so I can be in touch. But essentially, really simply, the Learning Triad Review is a non-critical structured framework for you and for your staff in school as we look through this learning process of comparing and contrasting how our journey is going with the PESPA offering we have between yourself and 2 other schools. And it will involve doing some deep exploring of what your offering is, highlighting strengths and weaknesses, and doing the same with 2 other schools that you will be paired with. Now, the process itself will work something like this, whereby you'll complete a triad self-assessment review tool, which I will guide you through at the very beginning of the process. And you'll be given a score in a number of areas, and there'll be certain areas on that you'll be able to identify as being perhaps a little bit weaker than others. You're then going to connect with the other 2 schools in the triad that I partner you with. And don't worry, I know North Yorkshire's huge. If you're over in Scarborough, I won't put you with a school over in Skipton, so fear not. After that, there's going to be an element of visiting each other's contexts and schools and spending a day or half a day there to see what works in practice and to be able to feedback what you've seen and what you can take away to your own setting. And then there'll be a larger period in the academic year that you'll be asked to implement any ideas and thoughts with regards to your PESPA offering and set the wheels in motion for that. Now, throughout this cyclical process, there's 3 touch points with me at these areas here. So connecting to begin with, it'll be myself, you, and the other 2 schools who are involved. There'll be another connection point when we collaborate and we set goals for ourselves as to what that might look like. And then finally, we come together at the end of the academic year to celebrate any successes that happen within that period of time. So it will be a year-long process, very light touch from me. So you will not have to hear me speak all the time in my dulcet tones, but there will be parts when I can help guide you. And as you can see from this cyclical model here, we split it up into the autumn term, whereby you'll be doing the first phase, and then the spring and summer will be a longer period whereby you'll be implementing any change that you want to do. All we essentially need for you with this is an interest in that you'd be able to sit down and we assign some non-negotiables of what we expect from yourself and the other two schools who will be in your triad. And then accept that it's going to be an honest appraisal process where we accept any critical reflections from each other and we have honest and open discussions, because ultimately we're trying to push the boat forwards and move the wheels forwards for all of our respective schools and so forth. Now, that would all take one academic year. And then if you're interested in staying on in the Learning Triad review process, the following academic year, you would be paired with another 2 different schools where you can go through that motion again, and you can then start to gauge insights from different schools that may have a similar context to yourself, or maybe they have a completely different context, whereas you're more urban and they're more rural and so forth. So if that's something which might have perked your interest and you may be interested in starting in September 22 and going through the process with myself and other PE leads across North Yorkshire, in the feedback form at the end, I'll ask you to register your interest and I will be in touch in due course. For now, though, this is where I pass over to the esteemed Will Swaithes, who I can see has joined us, and I'm excited to hear what Will has to say. And there'll hopefully be an opportunity for 5 minutes or so of a bit of Q&A and feeding back at the end of this. So thanks for joining us, Will. Really appreciate it. You might want to do a quick intro to those who maybe aren't familiar with you and your work, and then take it away, my friend.
Brilliant, pleasure. Thanks very much, Ryan. Right, can I just check, how long have I got? Sorry. You're on mute.
20 minutes or so, Will, if you need. Do you need me to stop sharing my screen?
Yeah, perfect. If you can stop sharing and then I will share. Afternoon, everybody. So yeah, I've got lots I'd love to share, but we're not going to have time. So I'm going to get through what I can. Apologies if it feels a little bit like talking at you for a little bit, but then there'll be a chance to listen back from you as well. So my hope, I don't know how I'm going to manage this in 20 minutes, was to remind ourselves that assessment isn't just what you record and report. It's also about the diagnostic and the formative aspects to that. And in fact, those are the bits that have the most impact. And to briefly touch on what I call my 4M principles of assessment. So whether it's primary school or secondary school or special school, an international school, state system, independent sector, we've got to make sure that it abides by these 4 M's of being meaningful, measurable, manageable, and motivating. Don't worry if you didn't write those down, there's a slide with them in a bit. And then I guess what I'm hoping is to help you unpick how you could assess more effectively against your curriculum intent. So the big problem I see in lots of schools is, and interesting to have tuned in just as Ryan was talking about the Ofsted research, but this, desire to enrich lives through PE and sport, to unlock potential, to get everyone healthy, happy, etc., etc. Lots of schools have worked really hard on coming up with quite a holistic intent statement that's about all children and not just about sport. And then often we see assessment as siloed in activities like football or rugby. And I'm not sure that that does a very good job. So I'm hopefully going to get you to kind of self-reflect a little bit, challenge your thinking, and fingers crossed, inspire you a little bit with some examples as we go. So I'm sure you'll have come across this before, the idea that we've got to think CLAP. We've got to think, how do we get the curriculum? C for curriculum, the L for learning, the A for assessment, and the P for pedagogy or our teaching, really working well together to mean PE is great. Notice I avoid the word outstanding or high quality because I think the word great or awesome is a nicer fit. So I'm just going to hit go on this countdown 2-minute timer. What I'd like to hear in the chat box is, in as few words as possible, what is the purpose or what is your intent for PE at your school? And I know this is quite context relevant. You'll all be working at slightly different schools. Don't hit enter yet. We're all going to hit enter together when the clock gets down to 50 seconds. So ideally in student-friendly language, if a child at your school, if I visited tomorrow, if I said to them, you know, what's the point in PE? Why do you do it? What would you love them to say back to me? You got another 20 seconds, and then we're going to start hitting enter. Bought you a bit of extra time then. So in 10 seconds time, we are all going to hit enter, even if you've not finished typing. There's no spag testing. We're not worried about grammar. But yeah, hit enter, everyone, please. Let's have a little read. Is there much? Brilliant, amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Awesome. So fastest finger goes to Jason. If your children at your school were able to tell me that PE is fun, competitive, challenging, and rewarding, you'd be happy. Sarah, it's about being active, not just in lessons, but beyond and into the community. Paul, nice, that idea around healthy mind and healthy body. And actually, there's a little element of dualism that you're discussing there. And I think a lot of particularly physical literacy research talks about monism, how actually the mind and body aren't disconnected. Guy Claxton writes some really good stuff on that. Charlotte's written a big sentence, which is probably on her website, about offering every child the opportunity to blah, 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 which is brilliant. So my issue with these intent statements is they're not very memorable often. So I quite like working with acronyms or ways to remember them. So hopefully yours is built on what the Department for Education's national curriculum says, the purpose of PE is, and there's 4 aims in that national curriculum document. So hopefully what you're writing, what you're saying here is meeting that agenda, but also going beyond it. I'm going to share one example with you. So this is a school that I have done some work with in Nottingham. I'm based in Nottingham. And I visited the school, talked to students, talked to staff, and got a real sense that they really wanted all children to be more well. So I had a bit of a play on the letters of well, and you'll see again, physical literacy is really at the heart of what they're looking at trying to develop motivation, competence, confidence, and knowledge and understanding to take responsibility for physical activity for the rest of their lives. But I quite like the fact that I was hearing about enjoyment quite a lot. And a few of you have mentioned that when I tuned in, Ryan was talking about fun, not featuring in Ofsted's research paper. But I quite like this idea of well standing for, in PE, we're helping them improve their physical, social and emotional well-being. We're helping them find fun in movement. We're helping develop lifelong participants. That's typically the one aim of the national curriculum that people see as most important, that idea of we want to ignite a love of moving for the rest of their lives. And then the last one is the one I'm quite passionate about. I think I developed problem solving, leadership, teamwork, even some empathy for other people as something that I got from my, in fact, not my PE experience, but my sport experience as a young person. So I want to give that to all children. All right. So if we take it as an assumption that that was your intent statement, the next thing is how do we assess against those areas? Because there's no point if those are my 4 areas in assessing ability in rugby or ability in indoor athletics or ability in gymnastics, because that's a bit of a conflict with what I think the purpose of PE is, the bigger picture, right? So quite often we need to rethink that assessment framework to try and really look at what matters most in our subject. So just another quick reminder, I'm sure I'm not telling you anything new here, but assessment, when you hear the word, most teachers automatically think of what do we write in the mark book? What do we report home to parents? And that's, I guess, the summative or the SATs tests. And that's the summative stuff that's of least use to the children. The bit that's of most use is the diagnostic assessment, i.e. the minute they turn up in our space, what do we do with them to understand their current level of knowledge and understanding, what they know and what they can show. Then we want to share where we want to get them to. So that's setting aspirations or targets for them before we then stretch and challenge individually. I typically do that using the STEP principle, so adjust the space, task, equipment, people, so that the students are really in charge of getting at that struggle zone, trying to find the lesson hard. Then the formative bit, the feedback, how you're giving them information that helps them get better. And I think there's just, thirds, a 33% each of balance of the diagnostic, the formative and the summative assessment. And we need to steer the conversation in that direction if we can. I've not got time to talk in great detail about these 4 M's, but whatever you currently do for assessment, run this lens over it and think, is this meaningful to the children? Is giving them a score at rugby out of 10 or a bronze, silver, gold, or whatever it is that meaningful to them? If it is, brilliant, keep doing it. If it's meaningful to some but not to others, how can you help the others find meaning in movement or find meaning in what you're assessing? Is it measurable? That's the one and the reason lots of schools struggle with, teamwork or resilience, or, how do you measure these so-called soft skills? So you've got to find a way to talk about. And for me, what's important is, can we discuss progress in them, or the ones that I'm better at than others? And I'll come back to that in a minute. Workload is killing us all. So manageable from a staff perspective is really important. And then the last one, motivating. How do we make sure our assessment motivates staff? That they're motivated to do it and to talk about it, and we're not put off by that. Oh no, like the word assessment is almost as bad as the O word of Ofsted, isn't it, in schools? Like we're pretty turned off by it. Okay, so we've got to make sure it's motivating, but also to parents, it helps communicate to them what matters in our subject. So I'm just going to pause for a bit of kind of formative assessment, if you like. I'm sure you do these dedicated improvement and reflection time moments. So again, in the chat box, can I get you to write, and you can hit enter as soon as you're ready this time. Is there anything that I've said in the last 10 minutes of your lives that's been useful? Do you have any questions for me? Find this really hard, but I'm going to try not to talk so that you can think, reflect, and type some stuff. Thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, you're not the only one, but I can't believe how badly we get that wrong. The WELL acronym, you're welcome to it. And those 4 M's, I don't think they apply just to PE, they apply to any subject. Perfect, I'm going to move on. So when it comes to assessment in PE, we live in this world since 2014 of assessment without levels, don't we? I call that the hand grenade. We were told we no longer need to tell children that they're a 3 or a 4 because those numbers were meaningless, but we weren't told what we had to do instead. So for lots of schools, they carried on telling them that number because they lacked. Or they changed the number into a word, and it was, well, establishing through to mastery or things like that. So what you've probably stumbled across if you're deep on your reading in PE, and certainly if you've worked with Ryan for a while, there's a number of different models out there for assessment. A lot of it dates back to long-term athlete development, some work that Richard Bailey and Dave Morley did a long time ago. And basically, even if, well, that was based on if you wanted to be the next world champion, you needed to develop not just physical skills. You also needed to develop an ability to work with other people. So some of those social skills, you had to develop the cognitive skills, the ability to think in terms of tactics and outwitting opponents. Also those creative skills, Lionel Messi is not just great on the ball, he's great at thinking. Those great Roger Federer versus Nadal battles are based on this idea of multiple domains, holistic performance. But I guess whilst that was done at developing for world class, we roll it back and go, actually, that's not just about developing world class, that's just about developing everybody. And whether you want to be world class or not, we need to focus on all aspects. So if you read the academic research, you'll read about the 4 domains of learning, or maybe even the 3 domains. So psychomotor or physical domain, cognitive or thinking, and then the affective domain, the behaviors, attitudes, how you feel. I did a lot of work years ago on the Me in PE framework, which I guess is probably my favorite. But when I see the Me in PE framework, I often see healthy me as an example. Well, the definition of health is physical, social, and emotional well-being. So it doesn't make sense to me to have healthy me in addition to physical thinking and social elements. But I think what's missing in those is this idea of mindset. So, how I feel on the inside and whether I will approach competition or challenge or working with other people or working hard and independently, or whether I shy away from it. I've jumped to the previous slide. If you follow Andy Fratwell, a great writer and thinker in the space of assessment, but very much supports that head, heart, hands model, or maybe you call that the brain, body, and behavior. And then Guy Claxton has got his 4, which was increased 8 R's. There's also the C's of competence, confidence, creativity, challenge, competition, and then Ronnie Heath's real PE. So it doesn't really matter what model you use, but I've looked for this at using that me model. And if I just carry that into the well framework, you can see how with physical literacy at the heart, we built on those tiers of different physical, social, mindset, and thinking strands. So I'm just going to quickly talk you through those as an example. So this school in Woolerton, from a well-being perspective, that's been split up into 4 areas, and PE needs to fit with whatever the whole school is doing in terms of tracking. Maybe that's bronze, silver, gold. Maybe it's 1 to 9. Maybe it's developing through to mastery. But however you're rating that, there's 4 kind of subsections to well-being. Under enjoyment, there's 4 different subsections. So do students enjoy participating? Do they enjoy an approach challenge? Do they enjoy competition? And do they understand how to find fun in movement? Then if we move through to lifelong participants, again, 4 little subsections to that. Do they choose daily physical activity habits? Would they choose to walk or ride their bike to school rather than get in the car? Do they choose to participate beyond school? A few of you mentioned that earlier as your intent. You want them to find sport in the community or physical activity. Do they connect with others? For me, that's why I still participate, because of the social connections. And then do they understand how and where to find SPAN? SPAN standing for sport, physical activity, and movement. So that kind of daily movement stuff. And then the last bit, I like the acronym of priceless. So there's a million life skills out there, aren't there? But P for problem solving, R for resilience, I for independence, C for communication, E for emotional intelligence, L for leadership, E for evaluation, S for sociable or sportsmanship, and S for self-confident. If you read it down there, PE is priceless because it gives you those life skills. And then what I really like in terms of a model, however you assess that in terms of numbers or grades or working below, working at, working beyond, helping children recognize what is their superpower. Of those different categories, which ones are they great at? And how will they use them to good effect in PE, in sport and beyond? And then which ones are their nemesis? Where are their weaknesses? Which are the ones that they're struggling with? Thanks, Eve. I love superpowers too. So which is the bit that holds them back? So the thing that's stopping me from flourishing in life, from being happier and healthier, more active, more able, is perhaps my evaluative skills, or it might be aspects of those fundamental movement skills, etc. So hopefully, I know that's been super quick, but hopefully that's given you a few ideas of one particular school that I've helped work through an assessment framework that I think connects with their intent and enables some sort of measurement of a meaningful and motivating in a manageable way. If I had time, I'd talk a bit more about a different model and how it progresses through, or this model I've done with a school in Loughborough, looking at very basic criteria at working below, at and beyond. I might talk to you about my APE and the idea of how we can assess against attainment, progress and effort. Or my last model is this one that starts to look at 5 healthy habits. So hopefully you can access the recording and have a little look at those slides. If you feel like you want more, yeah, find me at PE Scholar. All of those infographics and resources and talk through examples sit as part of this awesome PE in 5 Ways course. So I'm not trying to sell the course. I'd rather that you didn't bother. But if you want to go back and look at some of that stuff in more detail, that's where it sits. Ryan, how am I doing for time? Have I made it?
You're doing phenomenal for time, and I'm just sitting here smiling and nodding along, and I'm sure everybody on the call can appreciate and understand now why I invited Will onto this call to come and speak. I, for one, could sit and listen to you talk all day long, Will, about these things, and I think just those nuggets they took away even immediately, and hopefully we'll take away now, even like the acronym like priceless, just ways to remember things, ways to consider how that might look in your context. You know, as Will said, he's worked with a number of schools, but every school is so different. And we could tell from what you put in the chat originally that your visions are all similarities, but different, and it will fit where your school is and what the environment of your school is and what your ethos of your school is and what pupils you have coming to your school, all of those things. So I couldn't advocate enough getting in touch with Will, and I'm sure hopefully Will will be at some point down the line that North Yorkshire Sport and yourself we might be able to collaborate on other bits and pieces and share some stuff. Now, we are doing good for time, so it might be a good opportunity, if you don't mind, Will, just to sort of open the floor for 2, 3, 4 minutes for anybody who's in on this call to maybe ask any questions, whether you want to be brave, intrepid and unmute and ask a question, or whether that just comes in the chat, and it might be a good opportunity for Will to then answer that if you've got something burning at the forefront. So I'll keep an eye on the chat, and if you want to unmute, feel free to do so.
Thanks, Charlotte. Tumbleweed.
They've all got their minds blown, Will. That's why they're not sure what to ask. You've covered all bases. I was when you were looking at the end. Sorry
to interrupt you. Is it worth just sending people literally for 3 minutes to breakout rooms so that they can have a bit of chat about anything they picked up?
We've got a couple of minutes in which to do that. That might be a worthwhile one to do. We can certainly do that, and maybe then see what happens when we come back.
Yeah, exactly. I just find people are more likely to ask a question if they've sense checked their question with each other.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's have a look. Do that. We'll do smallish breakout rooms, and it'll only be for 2 or 3 minutes, just to sort of maybe feedback to each other what you've seen, what you've heard from Will, and then we'll jump back in this room and see if anything has been a commonality and come out through that. So let's create this here and open all rooms, and I'll see you back here shortly.
Winner. Yeah, sorry to interrupt on that, Ryan. I just thought, yeah, you and I could fill the silence.
That's all right. I mean, we could. The thing is, it's such a quick call, really. Even though it's 2 hours, it's still short. There's a lot you can get through. It's 2 hours for the full call. Obviously, yours is a very short stint, so I really appreciate it.
No,
you jumping on.
I hope I didn't try to squeeze too much in. I just felt like...
No, there was enough there to be mulling over, that's for sure, which was great.
Cool.
Let's have a look. Move here. I'm just going to move a couple of people who've not gone anywhere. I think that's just about everybody. Oh no, a few more. But no, that was really good. Well, I was thinking, I know that you love a good James Clear quote as much as I do. And when you the four M's, I was thinking of my head immediately. What gets measured gets managed, and all of that stuff was coming to fruition.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's so easy to fall into that trap, isn't it? We're busy. There's some criteria, some knowledge out there, but it's not, telling someone that they're, the best in the class or a grade X at football. They already know it anyway.
Yeah.
And what does that do to the rest? How does that include in PE rather than just give another badge of honour to the kid that already knows and the rest of the class that already think, I'm not sporty and therefore I'm not valued in this space.
Yeah, I agree. Give it another minute and we'll get those back in who managed to get into their rooms, and then we'll pass over to Eve. Okay. I think when you close the rooms, it gives you 60 seconds, doesn't it, anyway?
Yeah, so I reckon hit close and we'll see if...
Yeah, 60 seconds. No, really good dose. There's so much food for thought, and particularly as you flick through those last ones at the end there, just to see subtle differences. And that, you're right, it's moving away from that. Oh, so we've done I don't know, and even if it's net and wall or tennis unit, and what are the specific things in tennis we're learning, it's wider than that. It's more than that. It's meeting and matching with the vision that you have, and holistic work, which is brilliant. I know you talk about the different domains. I obviously usually do the four umbrellas, and I don't know if Amy's on the call, but Amy works at AYJS, Archbishop of York Junior School. She uses the four umbrellas, and the way that her pupils can articulate their learning and how they're connected in PE and how they're feeling, and how it's special to hear that and not just talk about, oh, I'm good at football. It's refreshing.
Well, and for me, a big part of this is co-constructing it with staff in the school. Right? By all means, steal one of those models I shared with you, but then make it better, make it fit your context, so that staff and students feel like they own it and they can connect with the thinking behind the words, not just, and there we go, that'll do to stick on the wall.
Yeah. Now, I think everybody has made it back. If anyone's got lost, I apologise. Hopefully we'll find a way back into here. But just a couple of minutes there. I know it was short and snappy. Might have prompted some discussion. You might have been able to connect with somebody else in your breakout room. But from that, is there any final words, any final questions that you want to pop in the chat for Will, or to ask, or to follow up on? Now's the time to do so before we pass over to Eve, our next amazing speaker this afternoon. I'm not seeing anything coming in the chat. I think that, again, it's been stunned into silence. Will, job done. Again, thank you so much for jumping on. It is hugely appreciated. I know that what you spoke about will be of enormous benefit to everybody who listened, including myself, and I can't thank you enough. I know you're a very busy chap. You're more than welcome to stick around. He's going to jump on and chat next. But if you've got to dash and go back to doing more educating of the masses, then go and do so, and I'll be in touch myself as well after this meeting. Will, I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Eve, don't take offence, but I'm going to run. I would love to stay, but I'm going to go.
Gutted. See you
Cheers,
later.
Will. Thank you. Okay, so now baton is passed. Eve, you've been in the call since the start. It's been a pleasure to have you. You've helped me out enormously already by letting people into the call. So
I like the power of the waiting room. Don't worry.
Yeah, we absolutely do. And this sort of changing complete topic now from assessment focus, we're now looking at what is always a commonality when speaking with any classroom teachers, any PE leads, anybody involved in the primary school generally, unless they have a background in such a thing. Dance always comes up as being an area, a pain point, something that is unsettling. And if I was me personally had any questions regarding that, you would be my go-to. Somebody I've confided in and spoken about for a number of things before. And I can't wait for everybody in North Yorkshire this afternoon to hear what you've got to share with us, and hopefully have some questions and pick your brains about dance in primary school. So take it away, Eve.
Oh, thank you very much. So I am just going to share my screen hopefully, if my tech skills extend that far. Let's see if I can get this to work. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so first of all, thank you all very much for staying on the call and for listening. As Ryan's already said, my name's Eve Murphy. I used to be a PE teacher. I was actually a secondary PE teacher and a school sport coordinator. So I've been in education for about 21 years. I'll say that quickly because it makes me sound old. And for the last kind of 10 years, I've been running Dance to School, and essentially the aim is to support teachers to deliver good curriculum dance. So I know we're quite short on time, but I'm going to hope to get through what good curriculum dance should look like. If there's time, have a quick look at how you can maybe put some ideas together for creating schemes of work, because it's really important to me that when people sit and give you their time, they take something useful away and something that they can put into use at school. And then hopefully some time for some Q&A at the end. So just to kind of get a feel from you guys, really, if you can just have a little think, if you think about the teachers in your school, and if they were asked to deliver a block of curriculum dance starting next week, how would they feel? So if you think they'd be pretty happy, put number 1 in the chat. If you think they'd be okay, but not 100% confident, number 2. And if you think actually they feel quite unhappy because potentially they might lack the confidence or subject knowledge, please put number 3, and we'll just have a quick look what everybody is saying. Yeah, so 3, 3, 2, 2, 3. Yeah, that's really, really common. And the reason I ask people to do that isn't to make people feel bad. The reason, I know it's taught well, but not really people's favorite thing to teach. Yeah, that's really interesting. And like I say, one of the reasons that I ask that isn't in any way to make people feel bad. It's to highlight that it is a real common thing that people tend to struggle with. So I guess the flip side of that is why dance. So if you just have a little think, just type 1 or 2 words into the chat of things that that dance can help to develop. So any words you can think of things that dance can help to develop in our children. Why do we teach it? Stability, creativity, confidence, expression. There is no right answer. That's one of the reasons I love teaching dance and love advocating dance in schools, because you can't get it wrong. Yeah, lots of creativity, lots of confidence, coordination, expression. Brilliant. Lovely. So as those are coming through, I'm just gonna flick onto the next slide of kind of my summary. Yeah, art too, absolutely. Of my summary of why it's so important. And for me, this obviously doesn't just relate to dance. This is PE and school sport and physical activity in general. But it's all those things. And the key thing for me is that lots and lots of our children don't get this opportunity outside of school. So even though we might not like dance, and even though we might not think it's our area of expertise, all of these things that children can develop, we're their only chance. Delivering it in curriculum time is their only opportunity to get all of those amazing things. Which is why it's so important that we try and find a way of delivering it, and delivering it well, so that we enjoy it and the children enjoy it. So in terms of thinking about what good curriculum dance should look like, last thing I'm going to ask you to pop in the chat, which of these following approaches most closely resembles how dance is currently taught in your school? So is it teacher-led? Is it a specialist, or a teacher standing at the front teaching a routine to the children and them learning it and performing it? So if that most closely resembles dance in your school, put number 1. Is it video tutorial? So we put in YouTube or something up on the screen for the children to watch and copy? Or are we trying to take a creative approach with using choreographic approaches and different stimuli? Let's have a look what people are putting. None of the above. Oh, that's interesting. Nick, you said none of the above. I don't know if you're happy to either put in a chat or on mute. What do you do? That's really mean of me, isn't it, to put somebody directly on the spot? Okay, don't worry. All of the above, a balance. Yeah, number 1, number 3. And 3, a combination. Yeah, okay, great, thank you. Oh, let's see, there's one more, 1 and 3. Okay. I'm driving, sorry, were you? I'm driving, okay, sorry, Nick. No more answering, Nick, don't worry. Okay, brilliant, thank you. So again, one of the reasons that I asked that is because I think when we traditionally think of dance, and one of the things that people tell me a lot is the reason that they find it overwhelming is because they think, when they think of a dance class, is there's a teacher at the front teaching some amazing choreography and the children are learning it and performing it. And then because they aren't comfortable necessarily doing that, we find a video and we put it on for the children. And the first person to say, I'm in no way sitting and being critical of any of those approaches. They all have their place and they're all useful. When we're thinking about physical education, so in terms of our curriculum dance, even if we are a competent, confident dance teacher, we shouldn't just be standing at the front and delivering. And the good news about that on the flip side is that if you aren't a confident dancer, so the number of people that say, oh, I wish I could have had a couple of pints before I had to teach, because it's that concept, isn't it, of unless we kind of can lose our inhibitions a little bit, we're a little bit nervous. You don't ever have to be able to stand at the front of a dance class or in front of a PE lesson and teach a dance if you don't want to. So again, the reason I put that up is hopefully good news that you don't feel nervous about doing it. So in terms of the building blocks of dance, I want to really quickly touch on what we should be including when we're thinking about our dance lessons, because we quite often think, well, I know what I should do if I'm thinking about other areas of the curriculum, but I don't know around dance. There's 5 things that should be in dance if we're thinking about dance or actions. So these are travel, turn, jump, gesture, and stillness. So those 5 areas, pretty much every movement that we can get our children to do will fall under that one of those categories. So travel, turn, jump, gesture, and stillness. So if you're not sure what you should be including or what children should be doing, it's those 5 things. So then thinking about, right, so that's our content. How do we make this into an engaging curriculum lesson? And obviously this is an example format that you can fit into however you structure your lesson planning in school. But fundamentally, that first opening activity should introduce what we're doing in our lesson and reinforce previous learning. So it shouldn't be like a standalone activity that doesn't link into anything else that we're doing. We need to use it to share our learning objectives, to reinforce any previous learning, to look at where we're at, thinking back to that assessment, that kind of formative assessment of, are we ready to move on? Have we done what we needed to do in previous lessons? So if, for example, you want your children to use mirror image later on in your dance lesson, I do a mirror image activity with my children in pairs, one leading, the other following, and it gives you that opportunity to go around, see which children need a bit more support, and effectively they're getting the chance to sort of try out the activities that you're going to want them to do later. So some kind of activity that introduces and reinforces learning. The next bit would be explore and establish. So at Dance to School, we talk about the 4 Ps, and just because it makes it easy for me to remember. So pictures, poems, props, and pieces of music. So essentially each week, give your children something that they can use as a stimulus. So you might use pictures for a couple of weeks, poems for a couple of weeks, and a prop for a couple of weeks. You can make it work however is appropriate for your children, but it's not about you standing and teaching a dance at them. It's about you giving your children something for them to respond to. The develop and create bit is developing some form of content that forms part of your performance piece. So each week, essentially, your dance gets a little bit longer. And then perform and review is piecing on whatever you've done that lesson to the previous weeks, and then performing that. It might just be, you say to the children, right, it's performance time, and you just watch them at the front. They might not be ready to stand up and perform in front of other people. It's just to you, but it's giving them that opportunity to develop that confidence, like people talked about in the chat, and also about being a supportive audience. And I talk to my children a lot about that. We need to create an environment where children feel comfortable to put themselves out there, effectively the fail's the wrong word, but to be vulnerable, to perform in front of other people, And that is only going to happen if you create an environment where children feel comfortable. And I've seen experienced teachers going into classes and going, right, well, I'm not really into dance, but we're going to give this a go. If you set that tone, you think you're putting your children at ease, but actually what you're doing is reinforcing that dance is something for them to be afraid of. So it's very much about going in and just setting that really positive environment so they feel comfortable to perform at the end. So that would be how I would structure a lesson. So I'm going to talk you really briefly through this framework, but this is a framework that I would advocate around teaching curriculum dance. So essentially start with a theme and then use a number of different ways to create action. So I'm going to go through this in a little bit more detail now. One of the reasons that I advocate making dances theme related is to make it relevant to the teacher and to the child. But it's also so that you don't have to be a dance specialist. We're not saying we're all going to do street dance. We're not saying you've got to be able to do a contemporary piece. So we're linking it into our curriculum. We're making it relevant across the school and we're making it more creative. So you can essentially start with any theme. So if I was teaching a dance, I'd start with my theme. So this is just an example. First lesson, I'd get all my children sat in front of the board and we'd mind map all the words that we can think of linking to our theme. So it can be a way for you to reinforce vocabulary, key words, key previous learning, but you just create a big spider diagram of everything the children know. And you spend that first lesson or two just experimenting with those different words. So how can we turn those words into movements? And then from those movements, you just create a little motif. A motif's a posh word for a small phrase of movement. And ideally, if it's your motif, it kind of encapsulates your theme. So it's that simple. So I do that every single time I teach. I start with my theme, start with a mind map, and I get the kids to come up with a really short section that we all perform, and that's our motif. So obviously that would change depending on your theme, but I always start there. This is just an example of a picture that I use with my children, but if you don't have a scheme, so you don't use Dance to School, you don't use a different scheme, just Google your theme that you're using and then just screenshot those Google images, make sure they're appropriate. There's sometimes a little one hiding somewhere that you wouldn't want to be using in your lesson. You don't want to learn that lesson the hard way. And then you can just display those for the children, have them up on the smart board if you've got one in your hall. If not, you can print the pictures off and give them to the children. You'll be amazed at what they come up with. And your job then is just to kind of go around the room, getting them to come up with the ideas. So just to give you a bit of an insight with this image here, I had some children that were working in a group of 4. So you can see the cloud at the top. And they used that kind of jagged rain line. They did an action with their hands kind of, I don't know if you can see this on my screen, but going 1, 2, 3, 4. But because they were in a line of 4, the first person did that movement, then the next person did it, then the next one, then the next one. So just by looking at that little image, they came up with some really, really nice ideas. You'll be amazed at what they come up with. So using pictures can be really, really nice. Another thing that we use a lot of poems. I get the children, if they're in Key Stage 2, to write their own. So in weeks 1 and 2, that's their kind of homework, if you will, if that fits in with what you're doing in literacy, to write a poem and then bring them in. I did a brilliant scheme with some children on the theme of rivers. And they wrote these amazing rivers poems, and they kind of decorated the paper and they cut the edges into wavy pathways and used glitter and all of those things that they could see. They use when they brought them in as a stimulus for the lesson. So you could spend a couple of weeks with a picture, you could spend a couple of weeks with a poem, and you'll see that different children respond differently. But again, it's not about you having to make up ideas. It's about you scaffolding learning opportunities and facilitating opportunities for children to create their own ideas, and for you to then just help them to piece them together. Props can be brilliant. Not every theme lends itself well to using a prop. I use this example because autumn theme is amazing for props. Obviously you've got the sycamore seeds that you can drop and then the children watch them rotate and move. You've got smooth conkers and spiky conker shells that can help you with different types of actions and movements. I do a recycling theme with a piece of paper, and you drop the A4 piece of paper and watch how it moves, and then scrunch it up and drop it and watch how it moves again in a different way. See if you can replicate those different movements. So some themes, props are amazing. If your theme doesn't lend itself well to a prop, that's fine. Don't use one. Because again, you could just use a piece of music as a stimulus one week. You could use a poem and a picture. So this is just giving you an idea of how to kind of engage the children in your lesson. But essentially in that explore and establish section of your lesson, use a picture or a poem or a prop or a piece of music, something different each week, and get them to create a little section using that different stimulus, and then just add it on to what you've got already. One of the things that I advocate a lot is using different ways of creating movement. If you wanted to use a teacher-led approach, so you make something up and teach it, that's fine. But even if you're really confident, we shouldn't do that all the time, because that's physical activity. It's not physical education. Children just copying us. There's no thinking, there's no communicating, there's no collaborating. Thinking back to what Will said about me in PE or head, heart, hands, or all those different ways, we can't assess all those different things with children if we're only giving them the opportunity to just copy physical movements. So teacher-led's great, but only in small doses. Improvisation works brilliantly. Put some music on, get the children to move around, and then just pick out ideas. That idea was brilliant. Well done. Let's teach that to everybody. Then you send them off again and you pick out another 4 counts, send them off again, and so on and so forth. You're not doing anything, and the children are coming up with the ideas. Chance choreography, fab. Works well with older children. So a list of actions on the board, and they can either use a dice or their date of birth to get a short section of dance that they then have got like maybe 4 actions, or they've got 6 actions written down, and they use that as a way of kind of creating their own movements. So chance choreography can work really nicely. Whole group choreography, really great. What I was explaining at the beginning about having a mind map, calling out one of the words on your mind map, and every child in the room does their version of an action. There's quite a good bit of sort of anonymity in whole group choreography. You can just look around a little bit if you've not got an idea. Nobody's really looking at you, so it can be quite a nice way of sort of building that confidence for children to create movements. And then small group, unsurprisingly, you put children in a small group, you might give them a picture, might give them a poem, might give them a prop, but they just come up with actions. So you could split your class into 6 groups. Each group has to make up 1 move, and then you all bring them together, and then you've got your little core of kind of ideas. So that's a really quick whistle-stop tour of different ways of creating movement so that you don't have to do it as a teacher. Once you've got those movements, you then start to think about, right, space, relationships, and dynamics. So again, this is quite relevant if we're thinking about gymnastics as well. But our space is our direction, our level, our pathway, and our area. Relationships is canon, which means one after the other. Unison all together, and mirror images, obviously mirroring movements. And then the dynamics are how we perform. So rather than thinking we've got to create this 5-minute long big performance, think about using one of those choreographic approaches and one of those stimuli, creating a small section of dance, and then saying to the children, right, your job now is to develop that. Can you include changes in direction? Could you incorporate different levels? So you challenge them with this kind of dance knowledge rather than just making up reams and reams of movement. So I'm conscious of time, but I think we're doing okay. I just wanted to give you a kind of a skeleton overview of an idea of, if you were thinking about creating a scheme of work, how you might go about it. So the first thing you would think about is, right, at the end of each week, what actions or what do I want my children to have created? Which choreographic approach am I going to use to do that? What stimulus am I going to use? And which element of space, relationships, and dynamics are we going to focus on? So I've done a really simple example of something that you might use here. So in week 1, we're going to create a motif using whole group, using the mind map, and they're all going to perform in unison. Week 2 is a traveling section. I want to use improvisation. You might want to use small group choreography. You might put them in pairs and they travel as a pair. You might not want to use music as a stimulus. You might want to use a picture. So this is just an example of how you can do that. If levels and direction is too much for your children to concentrate on, just concentrate on level. If you think they can do more, could you do level, direction, and pathway? So it's just hopefully quite a simple framework that says, think about what you want them to do, think about how you're going to get there, what you're going to use to inspire them, and which dance elements are you going to get them to focus on. And that's hopefully given you a little bit of an idea of how you might start with your theme and then build that into a scheme of work. Obviously, it doesn't have to be 6 weeks. It can be shorter, it can be longer, however you deliver that in your school. But it's really important, from my point of view, that the children are involved in that process. It takes the pressure off you as a teacher. It gives them that ownership. And people quite often say, I struggle to get children engaged in dance. And I promise, if you do it enthusiastically and you do it in this way, you won't struggle to get children to be involved. Because if you find a theme that it doesn't have to be a theme that you're doing in your lesson, you can pick anything. But if you choose something that they're engaged in, you find interested enough images and poems, and they're not even going to think, oh, I'm dancing. They're going to think I'm working with my partner and I'm solving a problem, or I'm creating something really interesting and I want to show other people in my class. So, and a child is never going to make up a dance action or a movement that they don't feel comfortable doing. Even now, 20 odd years on, I sometimes teach a lesson and I look around and I can tell when I'm doing too much of the dancing and the thinking and the teaching, because they kind of go like this. And I was teaching a few weeks ago in a high school, and I was teaching some choreography, and they sort of started chatting, and I stopped, sat them down, I played the music, and I said to them, right, give me one word that this music makes you think of. And then we wrote those words down on the board, and I said, right, find a partner. I want you to create 8 counts for me using one of those words on the board. And instantly they were back engaged again, because it's not about whether I can dance. It's about whether I can help them kind of be confident enough to create their own ideas and share their own ideas. So hopefully that's helpful. If I might, Ryan, use this opportunity, we are looking at the possibility of developing an app that supports teachers to deliver dance. So you don't have to, but I'm going to pop, I'm going to pop the link to the research. It's 4 questions. If anybody can answer it, brilliant. If you can't, it doesn't matter. And the other thing that I was going to say is, we on Dance to School give free resources each half term. So I've just put you a little screenshot up here. We've just had some LGBTQ plus History Month stuff on there. We had World Book Day on there. We've got some superhero content going on after half term. So if anybody is interested, you are very welcome to sign up for a free account. So if I can work out how to do this, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I'm going to pop that link in the chat, if that's okay. And while I do that, you can be having a think if you've got any questions for me.
Yeah, that's
that all right, Ryan?
Yeah, thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
You're
And if
very
everybody does want to think about maybe any questions you've got for Eve, you can see why, you could spend a full day with Eve in your school and get the full benefits of her wisdom. But really fascinating and interesting things. And those who followed me and know me for a while now, I'm probably going to be repeating something you've heard me say on the podcast or in person to you, but some of the most successful dance units I did, Eve's definitely been told this, is when I used fireworks as a theme, if you like, around about bonfire night, and used pictures and photographs of fireworks and different kinds of fireworks placed in different positions in the hall, and movements linked to what that looks like and what it feels like. And just to sort of then create this motif with different movements and adding in these different dynamics as the weeks passed by. That was incredibly successful with the year 3-4 class that I worked with. I'm a big fan of the music from Fantasia, a Disney film. There's some great music in there if they want to express how to move based on what they're hearing. But just to reiterate in particular, what Eve mentioned at the end there, that making it meaningful. And meaningful PE, or meaningful in everything in life, is such a huge driver, to have a purpose and to be able to relate something to themselves. And if we're just standing there dictating what happens and do this and copy this, they're not getting that. But as Eve said, when we can start to use an image, a prop, a piece of music, a poem, and they can then start to draw out how that holds meaning for them. What does this music say to me? what am I inferring from this image? How can I portray that through how I move? It's more personal. The motivation intrinsically is greater and it's incredibly powerful. So thank you, Eve.
No problem. So somebody's just said, how do you suggest teaching dance without a school hall, only the classroom or outside? It's tricky. I taught outside in a couple of schools. It obviously weather dependent. Outside can be really great. I've got just a Bluetooth speaker that connects to my phone. If I need any of the pictures or the poems, whatever, I take them out with me. Obviously hope they don't blow away. It can actually be really nice. I wrote a piece for One Dance around using your kind of physical environment as an inspiration. So with the autumn thing and spring as well, we went off and actually found things in our environment, but also looking at what you can see, whether it's rolling hills and trees or whether it's an urban environment, and using that as a kind of like making use of that rather than sort of seeing it as a barrier. Again, obviously, if it's lashing down with rain, it ain't so great. Classroom, a little bit more complicated. But I have just shoved class tables to the side. The chance choreography stuff works quite well. So rolling a dice, landing on those different words, writing them down, and creating that movement. But again, if it's the space element, you mean it obviously can be quite challenging, but hopefully that's given you a couple of ideas. I hope that helps.
For sure. There's great points there, Eve. And if there's any more questions, do throw them in the chat or unmute. We do like to hear other voices other than our own.
Oh yeah, please do.
Feel free.
Go for it.
And we'll just see if anything else pops in. And if not, and whether you hanging around or not, if there's anything comes in late and you have to disappear, Eve, then I can send it maybe your way. But just so you all are aware, Eve has battled through here because she's joining us with COVID and a bit under the weather. So she's braved the storm, as it were, to put some time aside to come and speak to us. So again, I couldn't be more thankful to Eve for that.
You're very welcome.
It's hugely appreciated and valuable information that you're sharing with us.
Thank you for having me.
Is there anybody else? Last call in the chat or to unmute? Otherwise, we're going to go back to my dulcet Yorkshire tones for the remainder, next 15, 20 minutes or so.
I am actually gonna shoot then, Will. But if anybody's got any questions at all, the link that I put in the chat links to my website. If anything comes to you later that you want to, I'm always more than happy to try and help where I can. So I will leave you there. But thank you all so much for your time, Ryan. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you so much, Eve.
Enjoy the rest of your meeting. All right, thanks everyone.
Smashing.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Take care, Eve. And there goes Eve. And Eve would always be somebody who I would look towards for guidance and her vast experience. And hopefully you got some useful nuggets and bits of information out of that. And of course, from Will just before. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen now, if it lets me do so, and plow on with the last few bits for this afternoon. There was Will. Of course, he shared his piece. We asked some questions. There was Eve. Ask some questions. And now is that chance I mentioned at the very beginning, whether we've got something to share or not. I did want to have it as an open forum because I think there is great value in having you guys on here on an afternoon, each in your different contexts, and being able to share. So it's kind of an open forum. Whether anyone bites at this based on the email I sent, we shall see. But I just want to take 5 minutes or so max to see if anybody was willing to maybe either jump on and share any success stories from the past sort of 3-4 months in their school from a PE perspective, physical activity perspective, school sport perspective, why it's been a success. But similarly, there's equal value, if not more so, from any challenges that you've faced in the past few months, where we can maybe have dialogue back and forth, where something might resonate. So is anybody wanting to or willing to care to share in this slot that we've put aside here? Just don't all jump at once, though.
I'll jump in.
Oh, you are a superstar, Alice. Thank you.
One of the challenges that I'm really facing is getting small groups of children to competitive events. We're so tight on staffing, particularly obviously with so many staff off intermittently at the moment, that I don't know how other people are managing in terms of if there's a local cluster competitive event where maybe 8 to 10 children would go. That requires sort of a couple of adults, one school staff, but whatever. But we're just finding it really difficult to facilitate actually getting into school competitive events. I just wondered if anybody else had any sort of nuggets of information as to how they've been managing that.
Alice, we've got the same problem, especially now a lot of the sports partnership activities are out of school hours and in the evenings, and having staff who are committed and want or available to take them out of school hours. We have the transport costs and the transport implications because we're our small school settings. A lot of the transport services are doing after school pickups at the larger schools, so trying to book a bus, so we're relying on like staff or parents to drive the children, and that's the level of responsibility. But we're struggling again now with the second round of COVID hitting us, so just having enough staff to do that and facilitate it. We're relying on TAs normally if it's during school times, but they won't go and stay and do school clubs and sports until sort of 5-6 o'clock in the evening, so we're really struggling as well.
Thanks for that input, both of you, Alice and Tracy. Is anybody else in a better position than I am sitting here who'll be able to come back with that? Maybe there's something that's worked for them. Maybe they're also experiencing the same struggles and what that might look like in your context.
I just put in the chat, Ryan, that our area is Skipton and got a new sort of partnership arrangement, and they have listened to that feedback of like groups of 4 and groups of 8 and groups of 10 and how hard that is, and they've reduced the number of events but actually taken a whole class, and that's only just sort of started, obviously. Okay. The second term, and that's working well.
That's interesting, Sarah. So is that who's facilitating that? Is that from the local school games organizer your way?
No, it's the tennis centre, but we're paying into that. That's our sort of, we're all contributing into them. But so obviously they're having to listen to us in terms of what we deliver for what we want. No, it's not at the LJ, it's more local than that.
Very good. And I've got a question in the chat, which I assume is aimed at yourself here from Stephen, who says, what sorts of events and activities do you do?
That aimed at me?
I think so, based on when you're taking them out for whole class.
We've been to football, we've done rugby, and there's been a basketball. So they've set out a calendar, and I think there's 5 events, basically one a month, and you opt in or out. And I've just said, because it was a class morning and a class afternoon, and we had the furthest schools, we've got big transport costs, and I've said, can I take my 2 classes in a morning or an afternoon, so I fill a bus rather than a whole day? And they've said yes, so that's what they're accommodating next. So they've been flexible with that. So.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for jumping on, Sarah. I appreciate that and sharing. And it seems that there are lots of commonalities in the struggles and things we're finding tricky. I can only reading some of the comments above there before we went on the tangent with competitions, with time and staff. Of course, as Will alluded to earlier as well, time is the biggest one, and unfortunately it's not a commodity I can provide more of it. We've got a limited amount of time and many tasks to do, and seemingly never enough time to do them all in. So I do massively appreciate that. Speaking of time, I'm conscious of time looking at my watch now as well, and I want to, in future PE League Network meetings, have this open forum. And I know it can sometimes feel quite daunting or maybe unsure of things to say, but I think sometimes we undervalue how beneficial that smallest snippet from our school setting can be for others, because we have got limited time and we can be so siloed in our own schools and not know or see what else is going on, even at a school down the road, let alone across an enormous county. That just taking 5 or 10 minutes to talk about, we found this difficult, who's got an idea? Or we've done this and it's been amazing, this is something you might want to try, I think is definitely something that we need to celebrate and do more of, and be open to listening across the county with all the PE leads. So we'll park that just for now. And in the next PE League Network meeting, it'll be something that maybe we'll spend a bit more time on. There'll be emails beforehand sort of talking about that. Just to wrap up for today, moving forwards. Oh, sorry, somebody wanting to jump in?
Yes,
my internet's been dropping in and out, so sorry about that. But I've just put in at my school at Braeburn in Scarborough, we've been we took part in them to defeat them. And I've put the link in the chat, but the kids they've absolutely loved it, and the parents have been getting involved. We've been getting them in, parents involved, and doing little workshops with parents as well. It's worked really, really well, so I would recommend that.
Smashing. That's Rosie, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Smashing. Thanks, Rosie. Yeah, I've just seen that pop up in the chat. Thank you for that. So that we can all have a little look and access that if needs be. We'd really appreciate you doing that. Okay, so just to sort of tie a few loose ends up my end from a North Yorkshire sport perspective, before I get you to do one final task, is just to go through a couple of CPD opportunities, things from my end, which are either upcoming or you've got to keep an eye on. I'll go through a couple of these individually in a moment, but level 4 supporting pupils' wellbeing through PE course. I know Anna was on here earlier. She might be on here now to join me for that. And we've had the first course run to an end now, and we're looking to start another one really in the summer term and looking for more delegates to join us. It's a course done entirely remotely, and I'll share with you on a couple of slides' time some excellent feedback we've had from one particular school who it's really transformed and revolutionised the way they deliver PE. We're currently delivering a level 5/6 PE specialism course right now, and we're looking to start another one in autumn term. So I just want you to bear that in mind and keep your eyes on your emails. If you would be interested and haven't undertaken the level 5/6 specialism, there'll be an autumn start date for another cohort. It's been difficult in the past year or so with COVID, but now we're going back to more face-to-face working if we can. It's a hybrid approach of working with myself and then some practical as well, well worth looking into. We ran an inclusion in PE course a couple of weeks ago in Scarborough, ran by SGO Fran Nicol, looking at incorporating strategies for working with SEND pupils and including all in our PE sessions. That is a practical day session, which runs for roughly five and a half hours. And we've got another one coming up in Harrogate at Bilton Health and Wellbeing Hub on the 26th of May. Details for that can be found on North Yorkshire Sports website, and you can go on and sign up. There are still some places left. I think it works out at about £20 off the top of my head for the day. Might be 25 maximum, but it's very practical, very hands-on, and some great strategies in there. We've also got the Yorkshire Learning Hub modules, which I'll get onto in a moment. But first, just level 4 feedback. This is a new qualification. It's been around for about a year now. It's a course that I tutor myself, and it's ran online. I can see somebody, I don't know who it is because it says iPhone, who said it's fantastic in the chat. So I appreciate that. Maybe it's Anna through Stealth. I'm not sure. But it is a course which is delivered entirely online. It's 5 2-hour sessions with myself where there's tasks to go away and do. But I think it's well worth it in terms of just being a therapy session to chat, beneficial for you as well as the pupils. And you can see some of the feedback here on the screen from Archbishop of York Junior School in York, feedback from a pupil at the top there who worked with us. And then also at the bottom, Amy, who I don't think is on the call this evening, some feedback from her about how it's helped transform her PE in her school. On the next slide, I've got a video clip I'm hoping you can hear from the acting head teacher at the school who's given us a bit of feedback. If you can't hear this video, do let me know in the chat. I'm hoping you can.
The impact of Amy being on the course and
can you all hear that? Yeah, cool.
Looking at the impact on well-being and fitness has really changed everybody's mindset. I think children now, even those children who perhaps aren't PE or sporty children, love PE, and they're able to articulate how they're feeling because they're being more active. I think they've embraced the fact that it doesn't matter if they're not great physically, but that they can still get the enjoyment of PE.
So a really nice summary there. And that was the journey which was just started last year through Amy herself. And she's really put lots and lots of things in motion from the course to huge success. And well worth thinking about. So it's something to maybe explore if you're interested. We're looking to start a cohort in the summer term. Depending on uptake, there'll be for sure one starting in the autumn term moving forward as well. Yorkshire and Humble Learning Community, if you've not visited, get yourself over there and visit. It's a free online resource with a number of courses that you can just sit down and watch in your own time, spend 15 minutes with a brew and a biscuit, all manner of topics on there. The school-focused ones, I've taken a screenshot here on the right that you can see. One of my favourite ones is the outdoor classroom one. The outdoor learning module is absolutely brilliant from Sally Ward. But there's all manner of different courses you can take in your own time, pick up nuggets of information from, and perhaps consider implementing in your own setting. So if you haven't visited the Yorkshire and Humber Learning Community website, get yourself over there, have a browse around, and there will be more modules being added this academic year and into next as well. And finally, we've got our transition toolkit here at North Yorkshire Sport, which you can find at the link I've put on the screen here. Now, you maybe want to make a note or photograph that as well. You can't go onto the Yorkshire and Humber Learning Community and find it there. You have to put in this link here. And the transition toolkit is what it says on the tin. It's aimed at those Year 6 teachers, probably for after SATs. And there are a number of different sessions with resources accompanying it and video resources and activities that focus on the key areas you can see on the screen now, really preparing them. High school readiness, where we're looking at understanding self, teamwork and communication, self-management, goal setting, problem solving. And former Olympian James Curtin is the one responsible who put some of this together and is the person behind the videos. Not to mention at North Yorkshire Sport, we're looking for a couple of schools to try and pilot this, that we can get a bit of feedback from them running it themselves. And I know that my colleague Jodie at North Yorkshire Sport is also looking and probably will be reaching out to some schools if they'd be interested in having James himself and maybe Jodie come in and do more of a hands-on delivery of this transition toolkit. But it is a really useful resource for you to tap into. And if you visit the link on the screen, you'll be able to access the videos, the PDF downloadables, and maybe pass them on to relevant teachers in your setting and signpost them towards that. And then just to finish from me, what I'm going to do now before you all run away, because I know this is the time everyone often does disappear. And last time everybody disappeared, is in the chat, I have posted a link that I would be ever so grateful if you could fill out as soon as possible, because otherwise I know it will be forgotten because time is pressing and you've got a lot to do. But it's a link to a type form questionnaire from the back of this entire PE League Network meeting this evening. Within that, it will ask you for email address if you are interested in the learning triads, which we're going to be starting the learning triad reviews next year. So if you're a school PE lead in North Yorkshire and interested in being part of that collaborative process with myself and 2 other schools, please let me know. I will be in touch in due course. But it will also give me a good insight as to this entire PE League Network meeting, if it was useful, if it was rubbish, if it was somewhere in between, and what we can do moving forward for you. On the screen, you can also see my email address at North Yorkshire Sport. I'm the education manager here. I'm still looking to reach out with and work with more schools across the county who I've not had the pleasure of speaking with yet. So if you're a PE lead who has any worries, anything that you want to run by me at all, it is within my role to come. I can work with you one-to-one. I can work with your school and staff, or if there is a cluster of schools around your area and you want some delivery, some training, or just somebody to lend an ear, please do reach out via email. And I want to explore and come around the county more than I already have. That aside, final reminder, please visit this type form and feedback on this meeting. It will mean the world to me, and we'll be able to put something special together for our summer PE Lead Network meeting, of which I'll be looking ahead after this as to how that might look and who might come and speak. And I think that will probably be around about June sort of time, when hopefully we're really on that down slope heading towards the summer holidays. So I'll leave that on the screen there for you with my contact details. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to hang around and ask me anything, now's a chance to do so. But failing that, you are free to go 15 minutes early to get some food, put your feet up, and get some well-deserved rest. Thank you ever so much for joining me this evening.
Thanks, Ryan.
Cheers, everybody. Thank you.